Hi guys, Skyphonics here, and today we're going to be making that really cool, brassy, future pop lead sound that's used heavily by artists like Marshmello, Jonas Blue and Sigala. I'm basically tired of using vocal chops, and I really want to kind of give myself a cool lead sound that I can use in replacement of just like chopping up some vocals and pitching them up. With these kind of like brassy layered synth sounds, you don't really need a really catchy melody. I mean, you can drift around 2 or 3 notes, but it's just kind of there to complement the chords, and the chords move quite quickly, and then you've literally just got like 2 or 3 notes on repeat playing over the chords, and that really gives it a vibe. But once you got your chords nailed, using a sound like this can really help you give your track some energy, and it's basically just a brassy synth sound, but it's quite layered up. So I'll play my recreation first of the Sigala track, and then we'll get into everything. Okay, so basically this sound is made of 2 sounds. We've got a kind of synth infused with a brass instrument and another instrument which is supposed to be just a brass layer on its own to give the brass, like a real brass feel to it. So this is the first sound, which is the synth sound. So essentially what I wanted to do with this sound was have that synth tone to it, but also infuse it with that brass tone as well. So just kind of trying to emulate a brass sound as much as possible, but kind of still keep it synthetic. I mean, if you listen to the original track, it sounds like maybe there's 2 layers, so that's kind of the idea here. So we're going to try and emulate it as much as possible. So the first oscillator here, I'll just take off all of the effects and the filter. So straight away there's a note which is about 2 octaves up, and it's kind of a square kind of sound. And this is the sound that I started with. So obviously very weak on its own, but that kind of tone 2 octaves up, as you can see, is kind of where we wanted it to hit. I've then added a little bit of detune, brought down the blend a bit. So that's kind of the basis for how we're going to build this sound. And then in the second oscillator, what I've done is I've taken a sample. So it was just a kind of saxophone sample that I put in here. I found the note of it, put in, I think it was G sharp, put in G sharp, just literally dragged the sample into this window here, and then it is put it as a wavetable. Now this came out really nicely. Sometimes wavetables are a bit dodgy when you put them in, but this one came out really nicely, and this is how this sound sounds. So it's really got a nice, I mean, you can just tell that's a saxophone. It's got a real nice tone to it. So that's kind of the 2 oscillators, the 2 sounds that we're working with. What I've done is I've just put a little envelope onto LFO2 here, put the envelope on, took an off BPM, put it to about 1.2 hertz, and then I've dragged this LFO shape onto the level of each one. It's just to kind of emulate that brass shape. And then I've obviously used this, as you can see, I've used this same shape on multiple different things here, but obviously we've not got, as you can see, the FM from noise is on both of these, but we've turned the noise off just for the sake of this demonstration. But once we go into the noise section, I mean, what I've done is I've used the same saxophone sample that I dragged onto oscillator B, which is this. So it's essentially just a duplicate of oscillator B, so I just wanted it to be that saxophone tone, and then I've brought it right down and put an envelope on it here, so it's actually quite quiet. It's probably not doing anything, but yeah, it's just underneath these here. But the real magic of this sound comes in when we put this FM noise on both of these. Luckily we can put an FM noise on each oscillator. So both oscillators are being affected by the noise. So we've got our sax sound here, which on its own sounds a bit kind of weak, but once we put the noise through the two oscillators using FM, it really kind of gives it that brass tone. So let's take off the sax noise here and we'll listen to it on its own first. And then adding the noise via FM. So it really kind of, the way it kind of goes through there, it gives it a nice kind of saturation and a weird kind of detuned sound, but it really kind of helps bring that saxophone tone into that synth sound. And what I've done as well, I've put an LFO2, which is the same envelope that I've used for the levels here. I've put that onto the FM from noise on oscillator B. So as you can hear, without it here, still got the similar kind of tone, but I noticed when I put this on here, it kind of emulates that brass sound a little bit more. If I do it quite pronounced, you'll notice quite a change in it. And bring it down. So, I mean, it was just a case of playing around, and I noticed that once I did put that envelope on there, it kind of gave it an extra kind of brass richness to it. So I've just put it on 14, I think. It's not too much. It was just a case of slowly building up the sound using these different techniques and then trying to emulate that brass sound as much as possible. So the next thing I've done is I've put on a filter. So all of these, apart from the noise here, are going into this filter. So I'll play it without the filter first. This is it with the filter on. And that kind of like that kind of weird thing up there, that kind of weird tone, what it does is it gives you a kind of nice high mid, I suppose, tone, which is obviously emphasized with the resonance here. So I'm bringing the resonance up. So without the resonance, it kind of just sounds like it's being filtered out. Nice bit of, it's kind of still got that modulation to it, but then when I bring this up, so it's important when you're making sounds to kind of always be aware of how it sounds in the mid-range, how it sounds in the kind of high mid-range and the high range. So when I was making this sound, I was obviously thinking about that, and then that's kind of where I thought bringing the resonance up here to kind of emphasize the area around here. So we've got a nice kind of brassy tone coming through there, but obviously by adding that filter, we've removed a lot of the high end. So it was just a case of, with the FX here, trying to bring that high end back in. So obviously we got some distortion. I'll bring the mix right up so you can just hear what it's doing. So you can instantly hear it's giving it that high end a little bit more. Now, obviously can't have it too high because it just sounds a little bit too distorted, but we've got it on the sine shaper here, which is always the best sound for brass sounds. I've put the same modulation, which is quite important because you want to use the same modulation for everything that you're doing with this sound. I've got the same LFO on this here. I don't know what it is, but I think it's the way it's modulating this frequency band here. Distortion bandwidth, I'm assuming. But yeah, it's basically just modulating the band of the distortion here. We got it on post. And then obviously same LFO on the drive as well. So it sounds quite good. It's bringing those high ends back in, but we don't want to overdo it with the sound. So I've just brought the mix down to about here. So it's kind of barely noticeable, but obviously still kind of gives it a bit of tone. And then a bit of hyperdimension. I think it's just the basic preset. Brought the mix up a little bit here. I've brought the size right down and the mix just above halfway, just to give it a kind of little bit of dimension to it. And then EQ, what I've done with that is I've put a little bit of modulation on the frequency here. So as you can hear, so I'm just trying to kind of modulate those lower mid frequencies to kind of give them a bit of movement. So that's what that's doing there, and then just a little bit of a boost on the high end to make up for the filter that we've taken them out with. And then after that, just literally a bit of compression, just stuck on the multiband, brought the threshold down a little bit, and then just a tiny bit of the same LFO on the gain here. Obviously very loud, so I've brought the master right down, but so yeah, I mean, once you've kind of done all those processes, it's really a case of just fine tuning it to kind of give you the sound you want. But the real takeaways for this sound are just to kind of use that saxophone sample, which I'll provide in the description, to create a wavetable and then put it on the noise as well, and then, you know, playing with the noise and bringing the FM from noise on both of your synth sounds, on both of your oscillator sounds, is a really good technique to kind of, if you want to give something a bit of that saxophone tone, it's a really good way using FM to bring it into your two oscillators there. So that's the main thing. And then this, all the effects we have here is just to kind of tweak it a little bit in terms of high end and bringing out the kind of bringing down the dynamics of it a little bit. So that's the first sound. Second sound, which is our second layer to this, we've literally, I mean, it's a lot simpler than the first sound. I think we've maybe got a tiny bit of EQ on it, but what I've done here is I've literally just taken the second saxophone sample, which I'll also provide in the description, and I've dragged it into both of these oscillators. So we've got the same wavetable in here, we've got the LFO on the wavetable position, and then I've brought the bend up here just to kind of give it an extra little tone, and then I've put, this oscillator is on 0 octaves, this one's on +1. The first oscillator here has the level at 0, and the second oscillator is kind of where what's coming through the speakers, and then we've just got FM from A on oscillator B. So I'll take off oscillator A so you can hear it without the FM from A. So just another kind of nice saxophone tone. And then what I wanted to do, because it was kind of not hitting at the right note, I wanted to bring in a little bit of the lower octave with the FM from A there. So this is it with the FM from A. So it kind of keeps that high tone, but brings in that second oscillator as well. And what I've then done is I've just sent these two to their own group, little bit of compression and reverb, and then just a bit of EQ to boost those really high end frequencies, just to bring them back in, because I felt like it was lacking a little bit. And then here, just a little dip here, there was a harsh kind of weird thing in the high end, and then yeah, it sounds like this. So yeah, that's the sound. Very quick tutorial today. I just kind of wanted to go over my thought processes while I was doing it, so that maybe if you wanted to create a similar sound from scratch, you can just kind of follow the ideas and the general direction. But as I said, I'll share the preset anyway, and then you can, yeah, layer them over the top of each other, and you can get a really nice, cool sounding future pop track. So yeah. Hope you enjoyed the tutorial. I will be back next week. I'm going to try and do these tutorials on a more consistent basis. Again, any ideas for presets you want me to kind of try and recreate, happy to give them a go. But yeah, I think this is quite a cool sound. I'm going to be using it quite a lot. So yeah, thanks for your support, and I'll see you on the next video.